Hi, everybody. I'm James, co-founder of Accounting. Accounting is a go-to-market data analytics platform. We offer the RevOps warehouse, which centralizes disparate data sources across the go-to-market stack. As everyone probably knows on the call, planning season's in full swing. A lot of folks are using accounting for scenario planning, building the go-to-market model, cross-sell planning, etc. But obviously, there's another huge element to annual planning as well, and that's sales comp. And so we've got the best in the biz here to join us today with Ryan, VP of Sales, Marketing, and RevOps, as if that's not enough things to cover, at QuotaPath today to chat all things sales comp. So Ryan, thanks for joining.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, James. Yeah, we call it Comptober around here, and then Comptember, Comptober, and then Compber, I guess, for November if you're running behind. So, thank you very much for having me. Let me share my screen and we can kind of dive right in. So a couple things here too. Want this to be really conversational, please throw a bunch of questions in the chat as you have them. And we're going to talk about kind of two key areas of comp planning. One is, what are you actually trying to do with your comp plan? And then the second being, how do you roll out an effective comp plan? And we'll do that in two sections, so step by step. We'll monitor the chat as well. I do want to call out up front. So I'm Ryan. I lead sales, marketing, and RevOps, kind of the GTM org for QuotaPath. We help you use your comp plan to drive sellers to close better revenue for your business. So the whole reason you have a comp plan is to drive a human to do something. We help you do that, is really, and save you time calculating paying commissions naturally. And I do a lot of free compensation plan consulting. It's one of the things that I kind of offer to communities. I've probably done 400 comp plan consultations in the past couple of years. So if you do want a second set of eyes in your comp plans, or your CRO comes up with a wild idea that you don't quite get and need a second opinion, grab a half hour on my calendar. I think Kelly and my team will throw in the chat, and I'd be happy to talk to you about your comp plans. Going to be next week because I'm going on vacation for the next couple of days, but can do it next week. Cool. So let's jump into it. Yeah, and again, ask a bunch of questions. There are no stupid questions about sales comp. Nobody teaches you how to do sales comp, so please, like, ask away. So really, I like to start this with a couple things. If you're going to leave with a couple, you need to start planning comp now. You probably need to start planning comp 2 months ago, but if we're here now, start planning comp for 2026 now. You really want to understand the organizational goals. You need context when you're building sales comp plans. So understand, as a RevOps leader, like, what does the business have to do to win next year? And then use accelerators to drive incremental behavior. So we'll go through some examples of how you do that, but really think about an accelerator as a way to reward somebody for going above and beyond what you ask them to do in a base case.
And Ryan, quick question. You might cover this, so feel free to punt on it. But
Sure.
why does comp planning take so long? Like, I hear so often of like, I'm a seller. I didn't get my new comp plan until February or March. Like, are
Sure.
there big pitfalls here?
Yeah, so the big pitfalls are the comp planning process takes a really long time when teams forget to get all of the stakeholders in the process early. So when we go through the rollout process, I'm going to talk through, pull your reps, understand what they're thinking about and get their feedback on the plan, then go to the sales leader and understand his or her feedback on the plan, then go to the CFO and model the worst case scenario for the CFO. What's the highest commission rate someone can earn on a deal if they close a 3-year multi-product, whatever deal? How does that impact your total commission stack? Right. And so the reason it takes so long is because people don't precede these questions and bring in everybody in the process. And they roll out a comp plan in December, and then a rep complains or the CFO says this is wild, and they have to scramble and readjust, is typically what we see. So I think people operate with positive intent on this. The other thing is, I think people a lot of times don't do their revenue plan until later in the year. And it's a little hard to do your comp plan if you don't have your revenue plan in place. So that's a separate topic, but you're going to want to have your revenue plan in pretty good shape for next year as you think about your comp plan as well.
Yeah, makes total sense.
So this is kind of how we think about comp plans, right? Your comp plan is a tool you have to drive humans to do something. That's how you should think about the process. It is not a thing that sits in Excel. It's not a thing you hand a rep in January as a PDF that they print out and put in a pile of papers that are gone by February. It's a real living, breathing thing that you want to use to drive your reps to change the shape of the revenue of your business. And that's kind of what we think about as a product too. So I like little acronyms. I use Acme a lot. And it's really, how to use your comp plan to drive the right performance. And so you want to understand the drivers of success in the financial plan. We'll go through an example together, convert those into components of the comp plan, measure and evaluate and reiterate consistently. And that's how you want to be thinking about comp plan design for 2026 as well. So first step is you got to understand the drivers of success in your financial plan. I just made up a mock financial plan, 25-26. And you can see that this business, in order to succeed, to grow from 8.5 to 11.3 million in ARR next year, they need to really improve gross revenue retention, right? They need to go from 60 to 81% in quarter renewal rate, basically. And so if that's the metric that you're banking on for next year, you have to use your comp plan to drive everybody in the org, marketing, BDRs, AEs, AMs, solutions engineers, sales engineers, everybody needs to fundamentally agree on what's the metric that we need to move and how can I reward everybody at different spaces in that value or impact chain to impact that metric that you're thinking about.
I think that's
So
worth underlining real quick too, Ryan. I
yeah, of
think so many
course.
RevOps folks we hear they want to, how do we get more strategic in our role? And I think it's understanding what actually drives the business, being able to track that in real time quickly, and then tying that to your actions and priorities, which could be comp planning in this case. I think that's a
100%.
great
Like, I
step
mean,
one.
a RevOps leader is most effective when they go to a CRO or CEO and say, what needs to change about this business next year? Like, what are you telling the board that needs to change about this business next year? Are we making a move into the mid-market? Are we releasing a new product? What is the thing that needs to change about the shape of this revenue? And with that thing changing, then you can come up with ideas about how you could use the comp plan to get everybody to care. Because if I'm a rep and I'm not rewarded for ICP longer term contracts and multiple products, I don't care, honestly. I'd rather sell quick, small, high intent to churn deals that make me my money in the short term. So it's how do I get these humans to, and that's their right not to care. Like you use variable comp to drive people to care about things, basically.
Mhm.
So you want to convert those into the like major drivers of the plan, right? So scope of control is really big here. It's going to be hard to say, hey, for a BDR, half of your OTE is a function of renewal rate on key accounts, right? But you can say for a BDR, if you source, ICP larger orgs that typically renew at a higher rate, I'll pay you more money. So you understand like what's in the scope of control. How is that on their OTE or above that OTE? And then how are you like laying that out for them effectively? And what we see is it's interesting. We've done a lot of surveying, and people in theory I think more than half believe that a comp plan can like drive key business metrics, but you should see this happening more and more, and it's something that we should expect more out of our comp plans. I'll give an example for a customer of ours who, when they joined using QuotaPath a couple of years ago, they were primarily in month-to-month contracts. And over the course of their time using QuotaPath, have shifted from month-to-month contracts to primarily annual contracts, and now 85% of their customers are on 2-year contracts. And what they did is they used the comp plan to spike the rate for annual versus month-to-month for a new business rep. They did a big spike in rate early on to see if they could shift the behavior, and then they tapered that down over time. They did a big spike for 2-year and tapered it down over time. So you can see these examples if you're intentional with your comp plan and how you want to use it to move behavior. So taking like a GRR example, right? It's a good place to start is customer success and account management. What's within your control? Renewing a book of business, implementing new customers. You can understand this is like a really natural tie. You compensate them on individual GRR, right? If you care about gross revenue retention, make the core tenet of their comp plan the same thing that you're going to go tell the board you're going to move. But then figure out what are the things that 1 to 2. So I think about it as like a pizza topping sort of situation. Pizzas are great with about 2 toppings. What are the 2 things that you're going to accelerate their earnings for? That they're going above and beyond, they can earn above their OTE. And the reason you want to shape it that way is because if they're falling behind, let's say they're just having a really bad upsell quarter, and for some reason they just can't book upsells for the life of them. What can they do with the renewals that they're closing to earn as close to their on-target earnings as possible, but set the business up for success longer term? So maybe you're not going to have a great upsell quarter, but you could sign all your renewals early and for long term with high adoption for your implementations, for example. So how do you give a team member a way to get as close to their on-target earnings as possible without by doing something that's great for the business and thus makes them close to earn their money?
So Ryan, how do you think about, sorry, you mentioned
No,
this is
you're
kind of
fine.
like aside from OTE, right? So I mean, this isn't necessarily an accelerator, right? But this is maybe just like two paths to hitting OTE. Is that the right way to think about it?
So I tend to think about it as core OTE and accelerators on top of OTE because I And the reason I tend to think about it that way is because if somebody, what I really care about in comp plan design is that if a person is, I always think about this like the perfect robot person, if they just renewed what they're supposed to, like they are supposed to have a 90% gross revenue retention and book 150K and upsell a quarter. If they just do that, then they'll earn their full OTE. I want that person to then think, okay, how do I go above and beyond,
Mm.
earn above my OTE? Like your best performers who are doing that and booking only 3-year renewals 90 days in advance, I want them to earn a ton of money. So I like to think about it as accelerators on top of like one or two ways kind of horizontally to earn above their OTE versus a path to their OTE because I want them to try to get as best to like the base level characteristics as possible, and then from there find ways to earn extra money if needed.
Got it. That makes sense. And I'm also thinking about, especially with like the GRR example, you might hear like maybe from CSMs or AMs or something that, I'm not totally in control of a certain GRR number. The product sucks, for example. It's
Sure,
not my fault.
sure.
Sales is selling bad deals. Like, and then you also in the beginning showed like the financial plan. I think the plan was going to go from maybe 65% to 85% GRR or something. Like,
Yep.
how do you think about those complaints? How with like picking the right number to make this all like reasonable for reps?
Sure. So, I mean, in the same way that you have new business quota coverage, you're going to have some concept of GRR quota coverage where full OTE for your account managers might be 85% gross revenue retention while 80% is your board plan, right? So in the same way
Mm.
you have coverage, you're going to have coverage for members of your team. And effectively, what you want to build from a systems perspective is an op by op. You have all your renewals in place for next year already, right? So go through a bottoms up exercise. We actually just completed this here at QuotaPath. Every single renewal has a probability and a renewable ARR that we tie to think about, okay, what is like a reasonable gross revenue retention we could expect to hit for the business for our plan next year? And then how do I give a little bit of individual coverage so that if a person misses their target, we still hit our gross revenue retention target for the business on the whole. People are funny about gross revenue retention and net revenue retention. They don't tend to take the same principles in practice that they do on the new business side. Like on new business, you have quotas and quota coverage. You can treat this all in the exact same way, honestly.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Awesome. Sorry if I diverted us. And
You're
folks
totally
listening,
fine.
throw any questions in the chat or Q&A as well,
Yeah, please
if you
do.
have them.
Cool. And so tying from that GRR thread, you're like, okay, duh, Ryan, like AMs are comped on gross revenue retention. It's not novel. But what you want to think about is how do you make everybody else care, right? So how do you make marketing care? How do you make BDRs care? How do you make sales care? And that's where your comp plan can be really magical, is if you can give marketing, accelerate their earnings on variable comp as a function of generating ICP pipeline. And then you can give BDRs an extra rate for if they're falling behind their demo booking number, but they book one great ICP high intent to renewal op. And then sales, they close longer term contracts with ICP customers that agree to do testimonials, right? You start to build this kind of flywheel of everybody caring about the long-term revenue and the shape of revenue in the business. And that's when you can really start to have the comp plan be this driver of changing behavior if all of these ships are rowing in the same direction, basically. And this is where people, I think, fail. They say, okay, well, the CS team is going to be responsible for GRR, sales is just responsible for new business, the BR is generate pipeline, but they don't like communicate to these teams what the business needs to do to be successful. And GRR is an easy example, but you could think about, hey, we need to launch a new product. Okay, well, marketing's got to generate pipeline from orgs that could be a fit for the product. BDRs have to generate demos from people that could use the product. Sales has to close multi-product deals. I mean, you can do this with anything you need to do for your business, but you need to be thinking as a RevOps leader, how am I going to use a tool that I have? That's the comp plan. That is like an overlooked tool in your toolkit to drive people to change their behavior.
Yeah, this is great. I think this is where just like general data savviness really becomes important too. Is like when you understand how each of these segments are converting, you can tie that to close on revenue and retention and the comp plan is when I think things get really powerful.
100%. And I think you need to have some really key metric, like GRR is a tough outcome metric, right? Because it takes a long time. So you need to have some metrics that are more up funnel that you think could be fruitful, right? So percentage of new business deals closed that are in multi-year contracts, right? You need to track that methodically so that when if you say, hey, your base rate's 10%, but if you close a multi-year deal, I'm going to bump it up to almost twice, I'll bump it up to 17% of the ARR. Now, people are going to balk at that, but the truth is, if you, for a 2-year contract versus a 1-year contract, you don't have to pay the AM to renew it in the middle of, year 1 to year 2. And from a total contract value perspective, you're actually paying less on the TCV if you don't double your rate for a 2-year deal, right?
Hmm.
So actually, businesses can afford to pay way more on 2-year deals than that they normally do. But you want to make it something that's so dramatic that it tells the rep it would be stupid of me to ever offer a 1-year deal. I just would be foolish. Like, why would I even think that's an option? I'm not going to present both. I'm literally just going to say our business only offers 2-year contracts and test it, right? And we did this with our own business too. So I took over leading our sales team 2 years ago, and at the time, we went through the same story ourselves. We were 15% of our revenue is in 2-year contracts, and now it's like 85% of our revenue is in 2-year contracts because I jacked up the rate so aggressively for the reps that it would be silly, and then I spiked it and then I decayed it over time to be healthy for the business. But I ran this point experiment. Hey, give me, I went to our CEO and said, hey, give me $50,000. Let's just run this test and see if we can use the comp plan to drive a surge in these 2-year contracts. But you have to have a really good measurement system because if I'm not just going to pay you more money to close the same percentage of 1-year deals that you were before.
Yeah, it's such an awesome case study. But I also wonder, like, can you get reps going too far in the direction where they're doing unnatural things, or you're now losing deals because they're not flexible enough? Now, in reality, I imagine a rep is going to, offer that 1-year deal before they lose it. But the tracking becomes really important there, right?
Maybe. I mean, but there's something to be said about like if your gross revenue retention on 1-year deals is you have to do the unit economics of like how valuable is that 1-year deal even for your business,
True.
right? If you have a 50% in quarter renewal rate on 1-year deals because they never got set, yes, there's probably a system in which they offer the 2-year deal, they say that's standard, and then the person really pushes and pushes and pushes, and the rep says, okay, you can pay list price for a 1-year deal. Like, well, I'm not going to discount you on a 1-year
Hmm.
deal. But there are some cases in which I watch teams just totally shift their model and just not offer 1-year contracts anymore because they've found that the time to the implementation time for some of our customers is super long or it's just not worth it to be in these shorter engagements.
Hmm.
So, you've basically taken this key metric and you've done a pretty good job aligning everybody to this. And then there's that measurement piece. This is what we were talking about before. This is an example from one of our customers who I worked with. Same thing, presented new customers on multi-year contracts. They sent me this from their board deck and it made me smile. It was just how they've been able to move their percentage of revenue in multi-year contracts from 6% to 20% over the course of a couple of years working with us. But you have to have these like up funnel metrics to say, is this driving any sort of incremental shift in behavior is ultimately the goal here. And then finally, you got to evaluate plans really consistently, right? So when you build a plan, you have to be saying, can these ICs change this metric? Have you tied it to their comp plan effectively? And you have to reassess like what the level of influence is. There is nothing more demotivating than giving someone a component of their comp plan that they have no control over. It's like a really big reason I'm not a big fan of team plans or team performance plans. You want somebody to be able to earn their full livelihood off of something that's pretty much in their control as much as possible. That's what I would say. So we got these steps, kind of like analyze these drivers, convert them into the plan, measure and evaluate. And so from here, I was thinking, James, of going into the actual rollout process and how you get these comp plans in the hands of teams now that we're in October. But anything else you were hoping for me to cover on the like actual measurement and deployment side of the house?
No, I think that's great. I'll pause here and again see if any folks in the audience have questions, but this is great. And I'm keen to hear the rollout tips in practice.
Sure. Yeah, let's do it. So, best place to start, the first step in this is usually like understand the drivers of the plan, right? And the financial plan for next year. And so I'm assuming in this model that you've done that. You say, hey, and and with that, you want to have one sentence, right? So like we need to, in order for this business to be successful, and this is the question that I ask our CEO every year, in order for this business to be successful next year, we have to do what? And it has to be one thing. It can't be four things. It can't be sell a new product and search new business. And, what is the one thing that we want to make an overlaid focus on across our entire GTM org? So we're all rowing in the same direction. So once you've done that, you got to talk to your team. And I think this is something that RevOps could be a lot better at, if I'm being honest. I want you talking to individual sellers, polling them, taking them on coffee breaks, asking them, what did you like about the plan? What was demotivating? Build your little wish list of like giveaways for them. Because naturally, every year, if the team, you're probably going to make it harder for them to win each year. Rarely do you make it easier year over year for someone to make their full OTE. So if you're going to make it harder in some ways, make it better for them in others. Can you do things like vacation 2 week quota relief? Can you put more of them on quarterly quotas if they want to be on quarterly quotas? Can you think about, different type like you shaping their quota to adjust for seasonality in your business, right? If you're a heavy, we do this ourselves. If you're a heavy Q1, Q4 business and your demand is much lower in Q2 and Q3 as it is with commission tracking, why am I keep giving you the same quota and making it so you're going to blow out your number in Q1 and Q4 and then pretty likely missing Q2 and Q3? It's pretty demotivating, right? Like how can you have the shape of the quota relative to seasonality? And then I really like to pick my top performers and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking, and be hyper transparent with that. Hey, this is what the business needs. This is what I need from you. How does this feel? How are you, like, read them in early and just be human with them and say, hey, in a great world, I'd pay you 43% on ARR, but I can't because the business would run out of money. But here's what I can do. Here's what I'm thinking about changing, and what are your reactions as well. And don't go to the
Really,
manager, go to the reps directly is my biggest piece of advice. Like
do
don't,
you,
yeah, so
sorry to
sorry, go
interrupt.
ahead.
Is it one-on-ones, Ryan? Is that the best way to do it? Like I know some folks talk about like an actual like Google Forms survey type poll, but do you think like the face-to-face?
I've never found that reps are great at filling out surveys, honestly.
Fair.
And the other thing I would say is that the reps who have the strongest opinions probably won't fill out the survey. But so go talk to them and just take a Friday and just say, hey, I'm just doing a bunch of comp plan one-on-ones in the morning on Friday, like 15-minute debriefs, basically. And pick a couple people, pick your top performers, pick who's struggling, and yeah, it'll I don't know, get you to empathize a little bit with how they're operating. I found to be true. Um, Ryan had a question about comp plans throughout the year. Yeah. Okay. So this is a great question. So the question is basically, how do we adjust comp plans throughout the year, and how do we evaluate whether the plan was successful? So Ryan, my biggest piece of advice, um, and I'm not going to pitch QuotaPath. I mean, this is the thing we can help you with, obviously, but whether you're doing it in Excel or doing it wherever, have a clear set of going into the year for the comp plan, have a clear set of metrics that you were hoping to shift using the comp plan. My goal is to sell more multi-year, multi-product, whatever, sell more of X, and then understand how much you sold, how much you're willing to pay for those incremental dollars. And that's how you model your accelerators. So, hey, I'm willing to pay 40% more for a multi-product deal than a new business deal, than a single product deal. And understand, and that's especially fruitful if 30% of my new business contracts are in these multi-year or multi-product deals. And that's the assumptions you want to set when you're building the plan and when you're shifting it, to say, hey, how much did this bump in rate shift the actual revenue that was in this type of category, this like firmographic type of revenue? And is that enough? And if it's not, would I be willing to bump up the rate further to better accelerate that? In terms of like throughout the year, how you're successful, that's the same process. You're basically trying to measure in real time how good a job is your comp plan doing at driving that like shift in shape of revenue. And then the like evaluating throughout the year, it's a pretty manual process. It's kind of why we built this tool, where you can see how much revenue each of your reps are closing with certain characteristics. You can understand quota attainment over time. This is stuff that often lives in spreadsheets. It's why we kind of came to tackle the problem.
Do you have any data, Ryan, or does QuotaPath have any data on how often companies are tinkering with or changing their comp plan through the year?
So there's kind of a pre-post data set that I have for you, which is like using it in Excel. It's on average, I think it was something like 1.15 times a year for our customer base, like pre-using QuotaPath. A lot of them set it and forget it because they think about the manual effort of having to change their
Yeah.
plan. The core component of like the core set of the plan, they do the set and they do the set and forget, and then they'll make some tweaks. We oftentimes see, and what I typically advise is don't change the how a person earns. And this is, James, the question of like different ways to hit your OTE. Don't change the plan, the robot plan in the year, right? Don't mess with someone's ability to just hit their core OTE. What I advise teams to do is change their accelerators very frequently.
Hmm.
So we probably once a month as an org, which I think is the maximum time in which I would really change. Oftentimes I see once a quarter. We change the accelerators. So like, hey, we want a lot more. We want accelerators. We want customer testimonials. So we did a big spiff on customer testimonials early on in the year, and then we wanted to spend more time with the finance personas. We accelerated like building finance leader champions. And so you can rotate that really easily in a system like ours. But I tend to think have the core OTE be the mechanics of how someone earns and don't change that. Just change the accelerators that you're adding on top to pull in and out. And that's what people use our tool to do.
Got it. It makes sense. Makes you feel like you can be really nimble. If you're just kind of running like the base plan with spiffs every month, essentially is what it becomes.
Mhm.
To kind of maybe reduce some risk of, paying too much on deals or to pivot to, what's support for this at the time. I think it sounds
Yeah,
like a
it's
pretty
just, I
effective
mean, it
proposition.
gives you your business the ability to react, right?
Yeah.
Hey, like I didn't realize in January we'd be launching a new product in June. CEO comes and says, we got to get all of our customers on this new product. It's annoying if you can't use your comp plan to motivate those people to sell that kind of product, basically.
Yeah. It was like
And then
Turner had a question here too.
yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ryan.
No, so I'm curious. So Turner, basically the way that I think about this is that I the account manager role, in my opinion, should be measured on gross revenue retention of their customer base. I think it is how good a job did they keep? And I like to do gross revenue retention and then upsell separately. I don't like one NRR number. So I like taking your OTE, let's say it's a 70K base, 30K variable, for example, that 30K, splitting it like 20K of it for gross revenue retention, 10K in upsell, and accelerating both of those. The reason I like to do that is I don't want one white whale customer with huge, like massive expansion to overshadow the GRR challenges that an AM might be having. Like I don't want somebody just churning out a bunch of their customers and still hitting their full OTE because they happen to stumble upon this like massive expanding customer. I think Turner, where that the hey, it's out of their control, it's not fully in their control, obviously. I think you have to bake that into the assumption of their target. So if you're saying what percentage of gross revenue retention of like churn is probably dictated by something outside of their core set of control, maybe that's 5%, maybe that's 10%, what have you, have their full OTE be realized if they hit the GRR minus the like external impact, right? So have their it's the reason why you don't have their GRR target be 100%, right? You'd have their GRR target be 90% or 85% or whatever that's set for the AM because you know that there are some things that are fundamentally going to be outside their control. But ultimately, the AM signed up for the job of managing customer relationships. And that's how they're driving incremental value, in my opinion, is through the measure of gross revenue retention. But you can also to the point James and I were saying before, give them those outs so that if they in a quarter have 60% GRR, well, there's two things about that. One is if they have 60% GRR because one of their customers went out of business or something that was truly not their fault, you do have to afford yourself the ability to move some of those ops into like a static central name and not penalize them for it, right? You do have to have some like admin discretion to be able to say, this was just not Beth's fault. Like we had a customer go bankrupt. I'm not going to penalize the AM for not renewing a bankrupt customer, for example. So you do have that discretion to move some of it out of their way. And you have the ability to accelerate them on other stuff to get as close to their OTE as possible, like renewing customers early, signing longer term contracts, getting testimonials approved, so on and so forth.
Ryan, we also had a Q&A come in around what do you view as the ideal OTE split between base and variable, and how might that change for SMB versus enterprise?
Yeah, so we have a lot of data on this. I'm sure Kelly can drop some of our like early stage reports. On the basically my take on base versus variable is the more control, direct line of control that a person has over the outcome, the more higher percentage of their earnings that should be variable. So to me, new business rep should always be 50-50. It makes the math easier, it makes life easier. 50% base, 50% variable. It's just the good model and easy to manage it and model over time. The as you move further and further away from control, right? Seller, they signed up to be the captain of the deals and earn the money and close deals. BDRs, account managers, sales engineers, step of control is a little bit further away. That's when you push them in, 60-40, 65-35, 70-30, where they are still variably compensated, but especially to Turner's point, that they're doing a lot of work that's great for the business that may not need to be fully impacted by variable, but their OTEs are probably going to be lower than your sellers. Then you get into marketing. I mean, everybody at QuotaPath is on a variable comp plan because you have to dog food your product, but you get into marketing, product, engineering, they're getting closer to like an 85-15, 90-10, where because they don't have as much control over the revenue or pipeline outcome, that then has them be lower variably. So it's basically a scope of control arc, effectively. Um, okay, so Connor has a question around dealing with services when it's high value, 2 to 3 times ARR, incentivized services, but not the payout to be a majority of the OT. So the thing that I think about with services revenue is that because it's not recurring, it can't be paid as nearly as high of a rate as new business revenue, right? And I think you can frame or any type of recurring revenue. And the way that I frame that with an employee is to say, I have to go back if I want to get more services revenue, I have to go back to the well every time. And so this is not as valuable in a recurring nature. So typically orgs that I talk to are paying half or a third of their new business rate on services revenue. And that allows them to kind of offset the commission impact and not have somebody earn full on services. The question that I would have for you, Connor, and how you can play around with the rates is you want to give somebody a new business OTE, right? The 50-50 base. And probably what I would recommend doing is to say, because your implementation is so relatively high relative to the new business ARR that they're closing, you may even pay a much lower rate for services, but give them a new business quota and also give them a services quota and say, hey, this service, 50% of your variable is new business and 50% services. Here are the corresponding rates, and accelerate both for going above and beyond. And that will naturally give you the ability to pay a much lower rate for services than you're paying for new business. But I think a rep should understand if you tell them, look, I want you to spend your time driving recurring revenue, not static revenue. And this is how much more valuable it is to the business effectively. James, I think those are the bulk of the questions. I'll just make sure.
Yeah, I think we got them all.
Cool. Okay. So you've pulled your team, right? And you've gone through that process. Now it's okay, what's next? You got to understand, and this is funny, it was like a little bit of a preface to Ryan's question. So this is a little snapshot of QuotaPath, whether you're doing this in Excel, wherever you're doing this, you have to understand the impacts of this year's plan. So how much did you pay? What was your average effective rate? And what was your commission stack? So this is the one that no one does, which is massively important. Because when you pay commissions, you pay on the per person basis. You rarely pivot on the per deal basis. So I'd love to ask, like, what is the highest percentage of revenue you paid across your BDR, SE, rep, marketer, director, VP, CRO on a single deal? And you'll be bummed that you paid like 43% in commission on one deal because everybody unlocked some accelerators of some other kind. So you have to understand, like, what is your total commission stack and how good a job did your plan do at driving the revenue that you need and the earnings that you're looking for paired with the average effective rate. And then from there, you want to design and model plans for 26. One of the biggest pains that I've ever gone through is trying to understand how much would I pay in commissions. So I used to pay, and I should have prefaced with this, I used to pay commissions for a team of 40 using Excel. It was a very brutal process. And my least favorite thing to do was to say, how much would we have paid in commissions this year had next year's proposed plan been in place? It's a really gnarly process. You have to pull down all the data, do all the applications. It takes forever. Something that we've built into our product as well, so you can kind of model and play around. But wherever you're doing this, you need to understand how much would the team have earned if the plan was in place, and who are your biggest like winners and losers year over year. So if you're shifting from motivating multi-product to motivating longer term deals, well, you better know which of your reps is really good at selling multi-product deals and terrible at selling multi-year deals, and identify them as a potential retention risk because you've just made it much harder for them to earn their money and go above and beyond OTE. So basically, what a lot of people use our product to do is they'll sync last year's data to this year's draft plan to see how much they would have paid on a per person basis and model that out, and then have those conversations with the reps and say, hey, just so you know, if this plan had been in place last year, you probably would have made less money. Let's change how you sell so that you can make as much money again, basically.
That's great. I think the back testing is so important in all things planning too, whether it's changing account prioritization or territories or comp plan. That is such a gnarly problem to your point.
Oh,
That's
it's
awesome. You guys built
brutal.
that in.
Yeah, yeah. It's a no, it's a fun challenge because you want to do it. You obviously don't want the reps to see the plan, so it's like it can be a pretty tough process. But I think being transparent with the human about how things are going to change before the year starts allows them to prepare and how you coach and how you like change the shape of the motion as well. Other big gotchas, you were asking about gotchas. So other ones that I keep in mind, what's the highest commission rate someone can earn on a deal? Is the CFO comfortable with that rate? Do that before the year starts. Say, hey, like, what if someone closes a $3 million deal when our average contract value is 15K? Who earns on it? What if it's a $3 million multi-product long-term deal? And then what is the expected cost? What's your CAC layer cake? And then are there any ways this encourages bad behavior? So I've talked with a number of customers, and this is something that happens time and time again, where the base commission rate for a deal is 10%, a new business deal, 1 year deal, 10%. And then they tell me, okay, well, I bump it to 12% if a rep closes a 2 year deal. But it turns out that on average, their reps discount 35% on 2 year deals and only 5% on 1 year deals. So if you shake the math out, a rep earns more money on a 1 year deal than a 2 year deal because the accelerator doesn't account over impact and doesn't beat the average discount. So I had one customer had this happen where their reps weren't allowed to discount monthly deals. And so they actually like 95% of their deals were in month-to-month contracts. And when you ask the rep, it's because they could earn way more money selling monthly than 1 year deals. So you have to understand think about this as a rep. If you're handed this as a rep, what is this telling you to do? And is it encouraging any form of bad behavior? And then roll it out to them, right? And rollout is really key. I think this is where this is where RevOps can be really, really impactful. Because RevOps, your job is to interpret and take what the board wants the business to do and get Pete, the seller, to care about it. And that's the narrative arc you have to tell in person. This is what the board cares about. This is how you make the most money. This is why I'm confident you can succeed, and use data to walk through why they can succeed, and make it fun and make it that I want you to get the CFO. And we used to do this in a lot of businesses I've worked at. You kind of make like a ribbing thing about the CFO, like, oh, Beth's going to have to pay me a ton of money, and like walk through how the rep beats the plan. And if you can have a rep think about how they're beating the plan and get really excited about that, then at that point, everybody's winning, right? Comp is the one place where everybody can win. A rep is going to make a lot of money if they close great revenue for the business. Your CFO, they beat the plan, but the CFO is thrilled because now all your contracts are durable, long-term, sustainable, multi-product. And it's a chance for everyone to win. And I think that's something that people tend to avoid in their rollout that I think is massively important.
I remember a CEO from a past life telling us, I think this was when I was back in investment banking, telling us that he wants all of his sellers to make much more money than he did, to your
Of
point of it
course.
being a win-win-win.
Of course, yeah. I mean, that's the whole ultimate goal, right? Like, if you truly believe that your comp plan is something that can change behavior, and you truly think that, I mean, you have to know that your comp plan is tied in a correlated perspective to what's best for the business in the long term. But if you know both of those things, then there's no reason why a rep shouldn't be making a crazy amount of money and just like beating the plan effectively. And I think that was the major pieces I was going through. I mean, the last piece here is just you got to check on how the plan's doing, right? So check on it quarterly, understand, is that accelerator actually changing behavior? How's the effective rate change? Do I need to make any changes? And as you're doing that analysis on like a quarterly basis, understand the drivers and understand who's winning and losing, and then read your reps in if you're going to make any changes. Hey, I jacked up the rate from 10% to 15% for 2-year deals. Still only 30% of our contracts are in 2-year deals. I would have thought that you would have closed more 2-year deals. Why isn't it happening? And now there's an enablement question, or the rate isn't high enough, or you can go back and forth. But treat the rep like a human and like walk them through why is this comp plan not doing what I thought it was going to do. So that's effectively it. Understand your business goals, pull your team, measure the plan, model, get buy-in, and roll out and measure. It sounds simple. I mean, this takes a long time, which is why you got to start doing it now. But this is how I've helped a lot of orgs kind of roll out effective comp plans and use their comp plan for something better than, oh, I have to just pay this rep variably. So
Yeah, this is so helpful, Ryan. I really appreciate you coming on. We have a few minutes left if folks have any final questions. I have one more, Ryan. You,
of
you
course,
mentioned a couple things that were really helpful from like the RevOps lens of, pull the sellers, make sure you chat with the CFO, like talking about all these stakeholders and how folks can get ahead of like pain of comp planning.
sure.
Anything else you would advise or any tips you have from your experience for RevOps in terms of just like taking hold of this process? Like how can they set themselves up for success, get these things out on time, and in addition to anything else you covered today?
Yeah, so I think the first thing you want to do is you want to say, I'm interested in captaining the comp planning process. Very rarely does a CRO or a CEO hear somebody say, I want to be the captain of our comp plans for next year. Um, and I think from there you have to set out a very clear, agreed upon timeline from the jump. And the end of the timeline that you're working backwards from is when are you actually giving the reps these plans? Like
Mhm.
when are you rolling this out? And ideally, you're doing it in early December. I don't like to wait till mid-December because reps are distracted with end of quarter, closing deals. I like to do, hey, first week of December, we're going to sit the team down and walk through the plans. That sit down with the reps shouldn't be a surprise though, especially for your top reps. So I typically build a deck like this for the reps, and then I take my top reps and I actually just walk them through the exact deck I was going to tell everybody else. It makes them feel special. It allows for like no big questions in person. You're just kind of revalidating what you're talking through in a live, because you don't want this thing to be like everyone's shocked and surprised. And then yeah, you got to set a clear timeline. When is the okay, you roll out to the reps, then when do these have to be built? When are they modeled? When's the CEO signing off? When's the CFO signing off? Like, how do we work all our way up that like process and value chain to build the full plan and like communicate that and force people to be accountable is also huge. This QR code, by the way, it's my link for comp plan advice. So if people want to grab time with me, definitely let me know. Another question. Yeah, Matthew, we definitely do, right? So you can see effective rates. There's a question about does QuotaPath have a feature where I can see effective rate by like deal, by time frame. Yeah, so I won't. You can check videos on our website. I don't like to sell too heavily, but yeah, you can see like on a deal by deal basis how much someone earns. You can see rates over time. That's the fundamental reason we have a product in the first place is really to give reps understanding into what they're earning, and then give RevOps teams an understanding of what they're earning too, to see how the comp plan drives better behavior. But you can book a demo with the team on our website easy, and the team would be happy to talk you through it.
All right, maybe I'll finish up with one final question. Is there
Sure.
one monstrosity of a comp plan from your hundreds of consultations, or I won't say customers, because I'm sure all the comp plans are beautiful with QuotaPath, but what's the biggest horror story you've ever heard, if one comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, the probably the biggest insurance comp plans are quite gnarly, I will say, because they get different rates for different products across different states. So I had one comp plan where on the permutation basis, a rep, I think it was over 1,500 different rates they could earn.
Oh
So
my God.
like combination of states they can sell in paired with products they can sell paired with bundle, like if you ran all the permutations of all those combinations, a rep could earn 1,500 different commission rates was the craziest I'd seen, which I didn't love, of course. And so we were like, how do we? And they were like very ticky tacky differences. It was like 7.14%, 7.16%. I was like, how much is this distinct level of rates actually changing the shape of the revenue of the business? Can we simplify this? And I think we went through the process a couple times. We got them down to sub 50 rates. I remember that being a big win, which I was pretty proud of.
That is crazy. And I what came to mind for me was actually consumption plans as well. I know a couple of the big like cloud companies are still doing things in sheets and doing it by rep because the consumption benchmarking is so challenging. And I
Yeah,
think
so
Ryan just
so
asked a question too about consumption plans.
yeah, so Ryan, we did a usage-based comp plan webinar with Insight Partners. We do a lot of usage-based comp plans. We did one. Kelly, you can probably drop it. It's like our last webinar we did. So we did a whole walkthrough on usage-based comp plans and our advice like a week ago. But the quick advice I would give is that you have a spectrum of types of comp plans or types of approaches to usage-based. One side of the spectrum is just cash protection for the business, and in that model, you say a rep only earns when the invoice is paid. So, hey, cash in the door, usage happens, customer gets billed, cash comes in the door, rep gets paid over the course of like the first year, let's say. Great for cash flow of the business, challenging for reps, honestly, because a rep only earns over a long period of time and they don't get the dopamine hit for closing. Other side, rep friendly, is they estimate the amount of revenue and then you pay them a commission off of that upfront, right? Challenges are you don't know if the person's actually going to use that much, and there's like naturally concerns there as well. I tend to like to be somewhere in the middle, where I like to say, okay, what is our expected accuracy of a rep who is forecasting their like how much someone's going to use? Let's say they're like plus or minus 30% accuracy. Okay, well, let's assume the worst. Let's say they say this person's going to use 100K over the course of the first year. I then like to say, okay, at the worst case scenario, they'll use 50K, right? A rep can't be that far off. So you use the 50K and you pay them commissions on that 50K so they get the dopamine hit. And then as the invoices come through, if and when they get above 50K, then you start to release the rest of the commissions that the rep can earn over the first year. So you can avoid clawbacks unless your rep is truly like can't forecast, right? Which is something you have to manage with your systems and processes. But they get the dopamine hit up front and then the payment can trickle in. And it's something our system can do, right? So we can join with a CRM and then join with an ERP or invoicing system to like trigger the estimate on the deal they close in like HubSpot or Salesforce or wherever, and then have invoices come through off of NetSuite or QuickBooks, wherever you use. So hope that's helpful, and I'm happy to grab more time to go through it too.
That's
And
great.
then I
Well,
think what was the one other question? Oh yeah, Pete. Yes, so we integrate with like 35 sources. So pull in data from CRMs, ERPs, data warehouses, and reps can actually forecast how much they're earning, and that's the power of the product, right? It's like use your comp plan to see in real time and push that data back into CRM as well, which is where reps like to live. So, sorry, James, go ahead.
oh no, I'm just gonna wrap up here. We're a little bit over. I'm sure you got to hop since it is Comptober after all. Ryan, thanks so much for hopping on. This is great. It sounds like folks have any more questions that you have the link you shared for consultations. If folks have other questions around annual planning that's not comp related, we at Account Aim are also happy to chat. So anyway, everyone listening, thanks for taking the time and don't be strangers. And Ryan, thanks again so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Have a great day, everyone. See ya.